now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Saarma, Dr. Mart Saarma from the University of Helsinki. Institute for Biotechnology, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very grateful to Mira for inviting me. The day before yesterday, I was hiking in Himalaya, and she never thought that I will be here. It has been quite a journey from 4 kilometers above sea level to 400 meters below the sea level.
Now you're in extreme condition waiting for one extreme to the other.
When St. Peter was escaping Rome in Via Appia, he met Christ, and he asked, Quo vadis, Domine? So now I'm asking, Quo vadis modern biology? I will talk about the change of the research paradigm in biology and biomedicine. I will raise some general problems in biological sciences and in brain research, and I will say a few words about the European Research Council, which is a rather new European organization which is trying to meet some of the challenges which have been raised today. I think has been said already, the role of the science in society is definitely increasing. The funding of the science is increasing, and the structure of the science funding is changing. Technology transfer will be faster, and of course science will be more interdisciplinary. Even academic research will more often have a market value, and the key word of science will be more and more quality. Actually, modern bioscience or life science is changing quite dramatically. There is already now a fusion with information science, chemistry and physics. We are developing quantitative biology, systems biology, synthetic biology, bioinformatics, or rather biocomputing. And of course, bioscience will be increasingly a very important player in new technologies. Currently, biosciences are still mostly descriptive, almost lacking general theories. Modern biology, I hope, will develop quantitative theories and change research paradigm. It will be a true exact science. So what are the problems? As I said, modern bioscience is currently descriptive. Carl Linné was counting hair on the plants. We are actually counting nucleotides. So the difference is actually not very big. We could mention some of the theories, like Charles Darwin's theory of origin of species. I personally like very much the genetic code, largely developed by Francis Crick, which allows to determine the sequence of the protein based on the nucleotide acid sequence. We have the theory of chaos. We have the Ilya Prigogin's theory of the open system thermodynamics, but that's about it. So it's very, very different from physics, where theories predict experiments. We do experiments by chance. So what are the very important components of the bioscience development at molecular level? I think one of the key issues is to understand how proteins fold, and theory about the prediction of the protein structure and function. Could you imagine biology without understanding a genetic code? Dealing with proteins, actually, we are very much in this situation. We need to understand principles of DNA protein, RNA protein interactions. carbohydrate-protein interactions, lipid-protein interactions, and of course, understanding principles of intracellular signaling, cellular communications, or organogenesis, and as mentioned already several times, understand really how brain functions. So I think what I mentioned are currently the critical foundations of the modern biology and biomedicine, and their development depends. I think we do not solve these problems will remain a descriptive science, and we will stay in the conceptual crisis. In my opinion, there has been a very impressive methodological advance in life sciences during the last 40 years, but very little conceptual advance. We have sort of more information, but not more principle understanding, and actually no new theories. So what are the limiting factors? Lack of powerful methods of protein analysis. We are still very much in the 50s, despite of the fact that we use mass spectrometry. We almost lack robust and efficient method for lipid and carbohydrate analysis. And as mentioned in the previous talk, one of the big limitations is computational possibilities. If we want to look at the state of a molecule, ethanol is actually what we can describe in a very good way. A limitation in theories to predict protein, macrostructures, and of course, one of the big problems is the significant limitations in our education. So biology is still in a very descriptive phase. Continuing current education and research approaches, in my opinion, will not guide out us from this conceptual crisis. We want to understand the basic principles, how cells develop, function, and communicate. We want to understand basic concept of memory and learning and brain functioning. And of course, we want to have conceptually new method for functional in vivo recording and imaging of cells and resolution organism. And one of the big problems here is lack of resolution and lack of computational power. So if we look at the challenges in the brain research, we should mention that we are in the very, very beginning of the road. We actually do not understand the basic principles of brain functioning. We do not understand the basic mechanism of memory and learning. We lack clear understanding of the pathogenesis of neurological disorders. We lack early diagnosis, and of course we lack also efficient so-called disease-modifying therapies. We still treat the symptoms. Well, this is partially understandable because understanding brain requires very clearly multidisciplinary research. We need competence and collaboration from molecular and cellular level to organismal levels, and we also need the impact of social scientists, because our brain acts and develops in response to the surrounding media. The principal elements of the brain are neurons, which receive, integrate, and store and transmit information. We have in the brain 10 in the power of 11 neurons, and at least 10,000 different types of neurons. And which is probably quite important, and which makes a big difference with the computer, is that a single neuron can make up to 10 or even 50,000 contacts, and these contacts are changing in time and response to the environment. And that is a fundamental difference to the computer. There are at least 10 in the power 14 neuronal contacts in our brain, and they are changing. So there is a major modulation. So if somebody wants to compare with the Milky Way galaxy, which has 10 in the power of 11 stars, so this is a pretty small cake compared to our brain. And the engineers have still a lot to learn from the brain, because 1 cubic millimeter of brain cortex is estimated to contain several kilometers of axons and dendrites. All these I show to explain why we are still in the very beginning of understanding the functioning and of the brain. So, a few words about the future of bioscience. Modern bioscience will not change without very serious interaction with information science, chemistry, and especially in physics. The big leap in biology in 50s and 60s was largely because of the involvement of people in physics. Students joining bioscience and biomedical research should be fluent in basic science, in math, physics, computer science, and chemistry. Just with the basic biological education, there are no chances for developing quantitative biological theories to change the research paradigm from descriptive science to the true exact science. We also need integrated approaches to biological processes, and of course there is a great power of evolutionary approaches to the biological sciences, and then quantitative approaches. And once again, to change the research paradigm from theoretical predictions to the experiments. So when we look at the sophistication of the object, super, macro, micro, or nano, then in the collection of the specimens, here and here we don't have a problem. In micro world we have still a problem. In nano we have a big problem. When we look at the data collection, we have a big problem in nano and in micro, but when we look at the data processing, we have everywhere a big problem. So actually, computation is really Achilles' heel here, and that requires big and quick development, and we are very much hoping that quantum computing is coming to help us. So I will now briefly touch ERC, European Research Council, which is a rather modern European council which is supporting excellence in frontier research through the bottom-up, individual-based pan-European competition. The slogan is high risk, high gain. It supports largely individual scientists, no networks. It has a global peer review, no predetermined subjects, and it supports frontier research in all fields of science and humanities. And it is governed by an independent scientific council with 22 members, including ERC president. And I was actually for 6 years a member of the council, and last 2 years I'm the vice president responsible for the life sciences. So I think ERC has been a very crucial step forward for Europe. I think one of the very important things is to take risk and to support top talent in Europe, capable of new avenues in disciplines and training and inspiring others. And as said already several times today, basic research has been and will be the major source of radical innovation, the innovation which will change the world and also open completely early unknown markets. ERC has been providing a benchmark for all European national research authorities, and has stimulating also many structural reforms in European countries. The current budget for the year 2018 will be close to 2 billion euros per year, and we are very much hoping to double the budget during the next framework program starting from 2021. There are actually 5 types of grants. The major focus are to the young scientists. 2/3 of the EU funding is going to the young scientists. These are starting grants and consolidator grants, 2 to 7 and 7 to 12 years after the PhD, with rather significant funding for 5 years, and then of course advanced grants. And it's quite funny that for starting grants and consolidator grants, the PhD degree is required, but it's not required, or anything is required for advanced grants. You can just apply. And then we have a proof of concept. This is a bridging gap between the research, early stage marketable innovation, up to 150 euros for the grantees. And then this year is starting a synergy grant for 2 to 4 principal investigators to tackle interdisciplinary research problems. We have 3 domains: life sciences, physical and engineering sciences, and social and humanities, and there are 9 panels, and the funding is 100% decided by the panels. So this is just to show you that 2/3 of the ERC grantees are early in their careers. As you can see, the medium age of getting the grant is 36, which actually sounds much better than 42 or 44 for NIH. So I think this is one place where US can a little bit learn from Europe. After 10 years, I think it has been a success story. There have been over 7,500 researchers who have received the ERC grant. More than 90,000 articles have been published, and when you look at the 1% most published article, then ERC grantees do better than Howard Hughes medical investigators in the US. For this money, 50,000 people have been recruited and 72 nationalities. It's probably very important to stress also that also people in US or in other parts of the world can apply. The only condition is that you have to stay 50% of the time in Europe. Few words about the ERC and Israel. I want to tell that because actually Israel has been immensely successful. So altogether, this graph shows the number of proposals evaluated, and you can see that Israel has been applying almost 2,000 times. And here you can see the funded projects, and you can see that Israel has altogether received 409 grants, which, taking into account the size of the country, is phenomenal. If you look at the success rate, Israel has a very high success rate. It's 90%. Every 5th application is granted. Only Switzerland is doing better, but many countries from Europe are doing much less well. If you look at the top universities based on the ERC grant, and this comparison is now increasingly popular in Europe, and graduate students and postdocs look at these tables to select their place of the working. You can see that the Weizmann Institute is here, Hebrew University, Jerusalem is here, and Tel Aviv University, our host, is also doing extremely well. I couldn't escape the possibility to show also my home university, who is also doing quite well. So there are, of course, many challenges for ERC also for the coming years. We should contribute more to the widening of European participation. The new EU members and the former, as we call EU 13, or the Eastern European countries, are not doing very well. Actually, they are doing even worse and worse. And something should be done because the whole organization is based on the collegial and support. We have still a problem to attract more women as applicants and as panel members. Actually, the success rate is equal to the number of applications, so they are in that regard doing as well as men, but just the number of applying women scientists is still very low. We have to improve the success rate because, as you know, if the success rate becomes below 10%, applying becomes very similar to the lottery. So the ERC goal is to, first target is to reach 15%, currently is about 11.5. But that would require at least doubling of the budget. And of course, we have to do something to make ERC more attractive to interdisciplinary research, because always when we ask scientists what seems to be the problem, they always say that getting funding to the interdisciplinary research is always a difficulty. And of course, being part of the Brussels bureaucracy, we wish to maintain independence and get new degrees of freedom to make the program and the implementing body more agile. So, we are now fighting to get a larger budget for the next 9th framework program. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So the floor is open for questions. Yes, sir.
You listed physiology and ecology as two areas that can be applied for. But when you look inside the body of animals, into the brain and into the proteins and things like this, you didn't consider what's happening to whole animal or plant biology at all. Well, how do you see the future in that area?
Well, this is probably professional that I considered brain very, very important, but in the other slide I actually underlined the systemic approaches and the evolutionary approaches, and under that I thought also the ecological problems and the problems of the interactions of society, environment, environmental problems. So I consider them very, very important, and so does the ERC as well.
So the last speaker made a very interesting comment at the end of his talk in which he showed this sort of Gaussian distribution and suggested that we are always pushing ourselves back to the mean within that Gaussian distribution. And the peer review process does precisely that. So is the ERC doing anything that's trying to push us out into the extremes of the curve, given that we're at an extremophile meeting?
Well, maybe the major instrument to fight against that is that we have no restrictions in assembling our panels. We are trying to get the best brains around the world in our panels. We don't have any quota for universities, countries, sex, anything. We try to look at that, but this is not the factor of limitation. So having the best brains sitting in the panel, we think would allow us to meet these challenges. But we constantly also inform our panelists to pay special attention to the novelty, to the unconventionality of the application. As a good sign of being on a good track is that half of the Nobel Prize winners who have applied have failed.
You may have mentioned it, but what's going to happen to England or UK in future?
Well, this is not in the hands of ERC, it's in the hands of the UK government. But until they are part of the EU, they will continue to be intimately involved in the ERC programs. And then, look, Israel is not part of the EU, Norway is not part of the EU, Switzerland is not part of the EU. Well, the two best performing countries, Switzerland and Israel, are not part of the EU. So, well, they may have the status of associate country, and the only thing what happens is that they have to pay more.
Will you accept Texas as part of the EU for the future?
Sure.
All right. So, thank you. Okay. One more, and then we go to the next speaker, please.
Are you covering any educational research with regard to interdisciplinary at the student level, or is that part of your purview?
So ERC, well, European Union has a so-called Erasmus program and the Marie Curie program, which are responsible for the earlier stage until you get the PhD and have been a postdoc. And ERC takes over when you have been the postdoc.
Okay. Well, thank you very